حي على الفلاح.
It's a pleasure to be here for the first time in the state of Utah and at this masjid, and I'm coming here with lots of du'as for your community. I know for a fact that this city has received many refugees from different parts of the Muslim world, people that have been uprooted from their homeland and are just starting anew. So I want to start by making dua for them, especially that Allah make their transition easy and protect them in every way, protect them in the sense of dunya in terms of their rizq, and also protect them and their children, that they preserve their iman and are able to live functional lives and good lives as Muslims. What I wanted to share with you today in this khutbah is reflections from an ayah that belongs to Surah Al-Kahf. This is the 45th ayah, and if time permits, maybe we'll talk a little bit about the 46th ayah also. Allah Azza wa Jal in this ayah gives us one of the many examples He's given us to understand life itself. The journey that everybody here is going through, that I'm going through, that you are going through is very different. Your experiences, the difficulties you have in your life, the troubles that you have, the things that are giving you anxiety, the things that give you depression, the things that worry you all the time, the burdens that you have in this life are unique to you. And they're different for you than they are even for your children. And those of you that are married, the burdens of the husband are different from the burdens of the wife. Everyone has been given a different set of burdens and different set of overbearing thoughts. You know, if you ask yourself as you're going through your day, obviously we do things that are functional, like go to work or, you know, get stuck in traffic or do the groceries and all of those things. And we're functioning in this world, but there's another world that exists inside of our minds. And that world, it's filled with worries about the future, or it's filled with thoughts about the past or regrets about the past, or it's worried about, you know, all kinds of uncertainties, and they're always circling in our minds. And it doesn't show on the outside, but there's a lot of turbulence going on the inside, right? So what Allah does often in the Quran is that He will describe this entire journey that every one of us is going through, and He will give us an example to think about. He'll give us a picture, He'll paint a picture with a few words, and ask each of us to contemplate that picture, and the more we contemplate it, we'll get something of benefit for each of our lives individually. So what's remarkable about the examples, the parables in the Quran, Allah, one place in the Quran says, وَكَذَلِكَ يَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْأَمْثَالَ لِلنَّاسِ. Right? So this is how Allah gives examples for the benefit of people. Meaning only Allah can give examples in the way that He gives them. You would think this example is going to relate to me, but it's not going to relate to you because your situation is different than my situation. But the power and the miracle of the word of Allah is that when one contemplates, everyone finds something they can reflect on specific to their situation and only in ways that they can understand. So that's what I'm hoping you do today, and I do for myself also today as we contemplate these beautiful words of Allah. That is another incredible way of looking at this life itself, these brief moments that we have that are going to be gone all too soon. Allah says, وَضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Give them the example of worldly life. And this translation of al-hayat ad-dunya as worldly life is very common, but the word ad-dunya is actually the feminine form of afdal al-tafdil in the mu'annath form of al-adna. And al-adna in Arabic means the lowest. And so actually, literally, what's being said is the lowest life. And that's Allah's way of saying that life has higher and higher stages, and we're actually at the lowest stage. There's better and better coming in our future. So there's an optimism that's suggested. As tough as life may be, it's not going to get worse than this, it's only going to get better. It's actually, especially for a believer, that's what it's meant. Somebody might say, but what about hellfire? What about the punishment of Allah? Actually, Allah doesn't even consider hellfire life. He says about hellfire, لَا يَمُوتُ فِيهَا وَلَا يَحْيَا. He doesn't live in it, He doesn't die in it, He doesn't live in it. Actually, it's not even considered life. And the next life, the life after Yawm al-Qiyamah and the life in Jannah, Allah calls it لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. That's the real life if they only knew. So this life is actually the precursor, just a preview of what's coming in Jannah. Just a brief comment about that before we go back into this ayah. Allah in the Quran describes Jannah like no other religion describes heaven. And since I was here, I took the liberty of going to the Mormon library and spoke to a couple of the elders and had some interesting conversations with them about their beliefs and their concepts. And this is something I try and do, to understand other perspectives and how they see faith. But one thing you'll find unique about the Quran, the description, the specific description with which Allah describes heaven is not found anywhere else. You'll get general words like garden. That's what the Garden of Eden. That's all you get. What Allah will tell you is fruits and lahmi tayrin mimma yashtahun, the flesh of birds. You're going to have some kind of chicken barbecue or something. That's going to be there. There's going to be all kinds of drinks that are being served. There are servers that are charming, that are serving drinks. There are friends sitting together talking about how life used to be tough and what they went through and how things used to be tough. They're having a reunion. Believers are having a reunion. You know, all kinds of descriptions, very vivid, picturesque descriptions are being given of Jannah. But many of them you will find are things that are easy to imagine. Friends hanging out together, people enjoying drinks, servers bringing drinks, beautiful trees, waterfalls, cushions, carpets. These are all things we find in this life. And there's a reason for that. Even though our Prophet ﷺ told us, مَا لَا عَيْنٌ رَأَتْ وَلَا أُذُنٌ سَمِعَتْ وَمَا خَطَرَ عَلَى قَلْبِ بَشَرٍ. No eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard. So and no imagination has ever imagined what heaven has to offer, what Jannah has to offer. However, if you read the Quran's description of Jannah, it looks like very easy to imagine. Palm trees and beautiful mansions and spouses and all that stuff, right? So why is that? It is actually because this world is made a preview of what is coming. This is supposed to give us a glimpse. You know, Muslims see this life very differently than other faiths. And on many other faiths, this life is actually a curse. We were sent here as a punishment. In the Quran, we were not sent on the earth as a punishment. خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا جَعَلْنَا لَكُم فِيهَا مَعَايِشَ قَلِيلًا مَا تَشْكُرُونَ. He put, in this world, He put things for you that you can live well with and enjoy. How little you show gratitude. You don't put someone in prison and say, be grateful. You put someone somewhere nice and you show them the beauty of this world, and that's what makes you want to be grateful. This is what Allah does in Surah Al-Rahman. He talks about, وَالْحَبُّ ذُو الْعَصْفِ وَالرَّيْحَانِ فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Like, look at all these beautiful things I've made for you. Look at the scent in the air from the crop that comes to you. Look at the grain that grows, the crop that grows. What more are you going to be in denial of? You should be grateful. So Allah did in fact make this world beautiful. And you guys happen to be very fortunate. You live in the state of Utah where you're surrounded by beautiful mountains. You get to appreciate Allah's beauty even when you're stuck in traffic. At least you have something to look at. I come from Dallas. There's nothing to look at, So, there's this constant beauty that surrounds us. Anyway, coming back to this ayah. He says, just give them the example of this lowest life. And everything you experience in this life, every joy you experience is the minimal joy. The joy of a new baby is the minimal joy. The joy of marriage, the joy of seeing a beautiful waterfall, the joy of a beautiful sky, the joy of a delicious meal. All of these are the lowest. Like, there's way more upgrades available. And can you imagine? We're like, oh my God, that's my favorite restaurant. I haven't had it in so long. I need that shawarma or whatever, right? And that's your thought of joy. Or this vacation, this place you want to go to, or this car you want to drive, or this neighborhood you want to get a home in, or whatever. We associate joy with these things, and all of that is just the bare minimum. That's the rahmah of Allah. وَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا كَمَاءٍ أَنزَلْنَاهُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. If you want to get a picture of what this life is like, it's something like water that we sent down from the sky. I'll translate quickly, then we'll contemplate these words. فَاخْتَلَطَ بِهِ نَبَاتُ الْأَرْضِ. Then that water, because of it, the grains in the world and all the material in the soil, anything that can grow is called nabat. Grass can be called nabat, trees can be called nabat, fruits can be called, flowers can be called nabat. Nabat is the word for all vegetation, all greenery, all plant life you can call nabat. So the water mixes with all of these nutrients on the earth. فَاخْتَلَطَ بِهِ نَبَاتُ الْأَرْضِ. And of course, when rain comes from the sky that Allah is talking about, and the earth becomes green, flowers grow, grass grows, trees grow, farm grows, all of it grows, then you would think Allah will next talk about how beautiful it gets, how colorful it gets. And He talks about that in other places. But here, He says something else. He says, فَأَصْبَحَ هَشِيمًا تَذْرُوهُ الرِّيَاحُ. Then that same crop that grows, He didn't even mention the crop. He says it mixes with the soil and eventually it becomes this word hashim. And hashim in Arabic is al-muhattam. It's something dried up that has no moisture in it and can easily break and is stepped on. Basically what he's describing is dried up leaves. Dried up leaves and twigs that fall off of a tree, or grass that dies, that you step on and makes crunchy sounds, and it's worthless. And the wind just blows it off and actually creates dust and pollen problems or allergies for you. All of that stuff is coming from the dirt and the broken up leaves and all of that stubble that's around in the world. So he's describing now this life starts off with water from the sky, and then eventually it just turns into just broken up leaves that people step on. They don't even realize. If you were stepping on something valuable, if you were stepping on your new phone, you would be like, you wouldn't put your full weight on it the moment you felt a little bit of the crunch. But you don't think twice when you step on a leaf. You don't think twice when you step on a pebble. It's worthless, right? And it's blowing around. If cash was blowing around, you would have a heart attack. But
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. If you enjoyed this video, please do share it with friends and family. If you want to see more videos from this series, click on the box at the top. If you want to see other videos, click on the box at the bottom. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks.